vampire bats share food, parrots talk, and chimps crack nuts with a favourite stone. It was once thought that using tools sets humans and other primates apart, because it implies such a sophisticated mind. But many scientists are sceptical and point to similar behaviour in creatures far less obviously impressive than chimpanzees.
I went to a favorite place on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where I had seen herring gulls dropping shells on a seawall, a long, thin surface of stone. And I'd seen gulls collecting shells and dropping them and breaking them open on that wall. It struck me that, at least superficially, in terms of this behavior, it was very similar to some of the things that the chimpanzees were doing. And so I wanted to see if there was evidence for the same sorts of cognitive activity in herring gulls that people were so readily able and comfortable to impute to the chimpanzee. When a gull collected a shell at low tide, the gull would pick up the shell, fly at a very low, fast height, and go directly to the seawall, even though it couldn't see it. So that suggested to me that the gull had an image in its mind, a spatial map, if you will, of the surroundings. It also suggested some form of premeditation, some form of intention, and that same inference had been made about chimpanzees as they collect tools in the wild and then walk directly to either the termite mound or the place where they're going to break open nuts.
Everything you've told us, what does that tell us, if anything, about what it might be like to be inside that gull's head?
Ah, would that I could do that. I wish that's one of my great dreams as a scientist, and I think we're probably close to it in the next several decades. We're actually going to be able to assume the reality of being inside an animal's head. But right now we can't do that.
Science is by definition cautious and reluctant to speculate without hard evidence. Captain Ian Farker is unconstrained by the rules of the scientific game. As joint master of the Duke of Beaufort's foxhounds, he rides out 4 times a week in the hunting season. What can a man who spends his life so close to animals tell us about the minds of foxes and hounds?
I don't think they have a strong animosity for the fox. It's their breeding and their training is to hunt the smell and the line of that fox. They don't feel strongly about killing it, I don't believe. There isn't a tremendous bloodlust with them.
Where I think it differs totally from the humans is that last night they didn't know that they were necessarily going hunting this morning. And so they didn't sit there all last night saying, I wonder what we're going to do tomorrow and how we're going to plan it. I always think probably the fox is much the same as the way in the hounds. The fact that he didn't sit there last night. And we didn't send him a warning card. We send the local farmers a warning card and they know we're coming. But obviously the fox doesn't get a warning card. So he didn't sit there last night thinking, Christ, I'm going to be hunted tomorrow morning, I better get a move on. Or I better not eat too much, so I won't be able to run very fast. He only twigs the fact that he's going to be hunted when he hears the first hound speak. If he's an old fox and he's been hunted before, he will probably hear my horn coming into the cover and will think, oh, they're back again, I haven't seen them for a year, I better shift. I don't think that a fox probably knows fear in the same way that we know fear. I don't think animals know fear in quite the same way as we know fear, because they don't have this pre-thought. They're merely reacting on the situation as they come across it.
It's split, he's on one box and the other one's on a row.
I don't think a fox works out the why. For instance, if you hunt a fox and he does something and he gets away, which he normally does, we're pretty inefficient, he will then do the same thing again because it worked the last time. And often it probably appears quite clever, what he's done, but I think he's probably done it by mistake. I mean, a lot of people will say, for instance, that a fox will run through sheep because he knows that a whole flock of sheep crossing his path obliterates the scent for the hounds. I don't think that the fox works out that if he runs through sheep, it's going to obliterate his smell. I think by chance he runs through sheep, it does obliterate his smell. Next time he thinks, well, it worked last time, I'll do it again. I don't think we will ever really understand what they're thinking. Personally, I don't think they have the same thought process as a human.
In the 17th century, the French philosopher René Descartes turned philosophy and science upside down. One of his most disturbing ideas was that animals can't feel pleasure or pain. Oddly enough, even now science can't tell us with precision which creatures feel pain and which might not.
I mean, it could be the case that consciousness is a peculiarity of humans. They got it when language evolved, and that pain is a side effect of consciousness. And so that animals that don't have our language and our consciousness don't have pain. I mean, you could argue that. Some people have.
If I ask you whether, say, a fox that's being torn by hounds or whatever
Yes.
is in pain, what are you going to tell me? I mean, do you know or don't you?
Well, you don't know any more than you know anything about your fellow human beings. But you're using exactly the same kind of criteria that you would use for fellow human beings for these other animals. In other words, you're saying, are they exhibiting behavior that's like our behavior? Do they have underlying mechanisms which are like our underlying mechanisms? And the answer on both counts is yes, they do.
Britain has strict legal controls on how animals are used in scientific research. If their nervous system and behavior are similar to ours, they're protected under the Act to minimize suffering. The octopus was originally excluded.
We have a kind of checklist, and we just can go to another animal and see how many ticks we can put on this checklist. And when you do that, you find that pretty well every box is ticked for birds and mammals. It gets a bit more difficult for fish, but there's quite a lot of ticks there. And when you get to invertebrates, of course, there are many fewer ticks, and it raises peculiar problems, particularly associated with something like octopus.
Can you tell me about that? What's it like to be an octopus in pain? Can we
Jolly difficult.
know?
I mean, octopus has an enormous brain, but it's completely different in construction from a vertebrate brain. It develops in a quite different way. And there's no point of comparison, really, between an octopus brain and a vertebrate brain. So we have to really base our conclusions on behavior. And in terms of behavior, octopus is very, very smart and does a great deal that a rat could do, or a small monkey. I mean, they're very clever animals. And it was on that basis, and nothing to do with the nervous system, but just simply looking at the complexity of the behavior of octopus, that the Home Office committee that decides these things came to the conclusion that octopus, like the vertebrates, ought to be given the benefit of the doubt. which is a very interesting conclusion. I mean, they did it purely on behavioural grounds. Really, at the end of the day, it comes down to a matter of ethics and taste.
The common octopus joined the ranks of protected animals in 1993, and now any research involving an octopus must be painless, even though there's no certainty that it can feel anything. When science can't be sure about something as vivid as pain, then how much harder it must be to find out about more subtle aspects of animal awareness.
If the consideration of the nature of animal minds wasn't a mess, philosophers wouldn't be interested in it. Suppose we watch a snake stalking a mouse, catching it, constricting it, killing it, and then eating it. And we wonder, well, what's it like for that snake to be doing this? And then we learn, as apparently we are learning from the people that have studied this, that in fact, there's no single unitary place in the snake where this whole adventure has taken place. When the snake is searching for the mouse, it's searching visually or using its thermal sensors. It's going for heat. When it struck the mouse, then it's got to find the mouse after it struck it, and it uses smell for that. But those are completely separate systems. And then, once it's located the mouse, it has to find the head, because it's going to swallow the mouse head first, and it uses touch for that. And even though one of its senses already has located the mouse, it has to use another sense at a different time to do the next thing. Now, it's as if there's three different snakes in there, one for hunting, one for locating, and one for finding the head. And what's it like to be the snake? Well, which snake? And it seems that these three snakes in one don't cooperate, they don't collaborate. They're not in the sort of organization that is the obvious key feature of our sort of consciousness. Our sort of consciousness is where we do compare the sights with the sounds and the feelings and the anticipations and the recollections. We have this wonderful capacity to bring everything that we've ever experienced to bear, if we only have the patience, all on this one issue. If other species just can't do that at all, then their consciousness is very, very different from ours, so different that to call it consciousness at all is perhaps to be misleading. And I think that there are many startling facts of that sort that we're going to learn.
Annie's coming in, guys.
My handsome little monkey.
Come on a row. Good, stay. Roll camera, please.
Some people think that, for instance, all mammals are pretty much people in fursuits or swimsuits. If they're dolphins, they're very much like us. They just don't have language.
Good, easy talk.
I think that the minds of other mammals are very, very different from our minds. And I think this will eventually be borne in. And it's going to be difficult for many people to accept, because it will mean that they will have over-endowed these charming creatures with mental lives for many years. They don't want to learn that. Do they have minds? I don't know. Just in case they do, we include them as having minds. But from the point of view of science, that's just the opposite attitude should prevail. Does it have a mind? Prove it.